The economic response to the pandemic is a $17.6 billion stimulus package so far. Leftist media is using this to rewrite history and claim that Labor's second stimulus of $42 billion to fight the global financial crisis in 2009 was vindicated. In last week's Saturday paper, Mike Seckham wrote, "While there is room for debate about the effectiveness of some measures taken in haste as the country's financial system teetered on the edge of collapse, the response was undeniably rapid and decisive, and it worked." Well, correlation is not causation, of course, and while Australia narrowly dodged recession, the debt from Kevin Rudd and Wayne Swan's massive splurge, along with later spending, endures, of course, to this day. Not that all commentators worry about that. Writing in the Canberra Times last week, veteran journalist Michelle Grattan posed the question, can the coalition match Rudd in keeping Australia out of recession? Talk about a loaded question. Swan's chief of staff back in those days was Jim Chalmers. Now he's the shadow treasurer.
You were a senior advisor to the Treasurer during the global financial crisis. What lessons do you think you learned, including mistakes from that period, that you think are relevant now?
Look, I think overwhelmingly Australians should be really proud of what they achieved together under that Labor government during the global financial crisis, averting recession, saving hundreds of thousands of jobs, something which is admired the world over.
It was an invitation to share some lessons, not to spruik Labor's credentials.
Don't worry about the debt, feel the pride. A 2016 Treasury commissioned report from Professor Tony Makin of Griffith University concluded the stimulus had not helped, but had in fact harmed the economy, saying it was unnecessarily large and misconceived because it emphasised transfers, unproductive expenditure such as school halls and pink bats, rather than tax relief and supply-side reform. Still, life moves on, and Radio National Breakfast Hamish McDonald thinks the coalition has now vindicated Labor's approach.
The stimulus package is in many respects in line with what Labor did in 2008 during the global financial crisis. It includes investment incentives, wage subsidies to business, $750 cash payments to lower-income households, particularly to pensioners. Is there anything about this that you don't support?
You're right that there are some striking similarities with what Labor did successfully during the global financial crisis.
In fact, of course, Scott Morrison was at pains to point out the differences, especially in size. The main criticism of Labor's plan was that it would just spent too much. Morrison was also keen not to replicate the waste.
Fifth, we must use existing delivery mechanisms wherever possible. That's where it goes pear-shaped if you get that design wrong, as we learned from the last stimulus. We saw those mistakes of trying to rush a range of new programs in response to the GFC. This is why we've been moving swiftly but patiently to ensure that the response that we announce can address these issues.
Now, if we don't want to repeat the same mistakes, we can't pretend Labor's stimulus was blameless in our fiscal struggle. At least Radio National Breakfast Fran Kelly put it to Swan 3 years ago.
So, you know, your position is, of course, that the economic stimulus that the Labor government provided at the time was what made us different and our response and coming through the GFC different. But a lot of people also say, well, what about the mining boom? That helped. We were riding the wave of unprecedented growth in China exactly at that time, which was good fortune.
And I'll deal with that at the press cop today. That's simply not true. The Australian economy would look dramatically different today had we not put in place the fiscal stimulus and the tail of that stimulus through that period. It had nothing to do with the mining boom.
Even ABC Fact Check conceded that Swan's denial was over the top, saying experts told Fact Check that mining boom placed Australia in a strong economic and fiscal position ahead of the crisis and helped accelerate the post-crisis recovery. And journalist and author Dr Paul Cleary told the ABC in 2016 the timing of this boom was very auspicious for us, because just as the rest of the world was hit by the global financial crisis and their economies suffered and their unemployment rates went up, this boom in Australia was so powerful that it overrode that effect. So we escaped the GFC, and we were one of the very few countries that managed to do that. This is recent history and very relevant, especially as the government now looks at another stimulus package, because just like 2009, some government intervention is broadly accepted as necessary. What's going to be hotly contested is the amount of spending and the specific measures. Now, right on cue, showing all the dignity and poise for which he's become known in his post-prime ministerial life, Kevin Rudd weighed in today with a piece in the, well, where else but in The Guardian. He said, if the battle cry of our government's response to the global financial crisis was go early, go hard, go households, this government's approach to the current crisis seems to be go late, go half measures and go, well, go to Hillsong. When the devout Christian Kevin Rudd shows his true self to the world, there's no need for me to add any stimulus.